In this quick video, I'm going to share with you a strategy that is going to help you get more 5-star reviews for your podcast without having to ask for them at the end of every episode. My name is Kevin Schmidlin. I am a podcast growth coach. In about 3 weeks, I will surpass the 7-figure mark in podcasting, meaning that I've generated more than $1 million in revenue from my podcast over the past 4 years. And I just say that to let you know that I've done this before. I've been doing podcasting full-time for 4 years, and I've seen what works and what doesn't. And oftentimes when I'm coaching the podcasters in my accelerator program, I'm asked the question, how can I get more reviews for my podcast? Now, a lot of podcasters think that the way that you do that is to ask for a rating and review at the end of every single episode of your podcast. But I don't actually recommend that. And there's a couple reasons why. First of all, the end of your podcast episode is the golden moment to make a call to action that will get the listener to do something that will further their relationship with you. Ideally, you want them to do one of 3 things. Either 1, join your email list, 2, join your community, or 3, buy your product or service or join your Patreon, right? Give you money. Now, I've already published a video that maps out how you can make really juicy call to actions at the end of your episode. So you can watch that if you want the full picture, but suffice it to say now, the best way to do that is to make one really specific call to action at the end of an episode. Meaning, what you don't want to do is ask them to do a million things, like go to the website and join our Patreon and rate and review and do all these different things. You don't want to ask them to do everything. You want to ask them to do one really specific thing. And you want that specific thing to be the most valuable thing that they can do in order to stay in touch with you, right? To engage more with you or to buy from you or your sponsor. So asking your audience to rate and review at the end of a podcast episode is not the highest leverage thing that you can ask them to do in that moment. Also, a lot of people listen to podcasts on apps that don't have rating and reviewing functionality. So for all of those people that are listening to your show not on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, if you say rate and review the show, and they can't do that in the app that they're listening to, you've completely wasted a call to action on them. Also, the other problem with asking that every single episode is that your listeners, when they hear it once or twice, every time they hear it after that, they tune it out, right? So if at the end of every single episode, your listeners hear the same thing, if you like the show, please rate and review. If you like the show, please rate and review. If you like the show, like they've already tuned out, they don't hear it anymore. So rather than asking it at the end of every episode, like many other podcasters do, instead, you want to adopt a strategy that Pat Flynn uses to get ratings and reviews for his podcast. Pat Flynn is the host and creator behind the Smart Passive Income podcast, one of the OGs, absolute legend. He knows what he's doing. And even to this day, with an audience in the thousands, he might even be in the millions, he asks for reviews at a very specific moment. That moment is when he hears from listeners who reach out to talk about how much they enjoy the show. You probably have had this happen yourself for your podcast, right? Every once in a while, you'll hear from a complete stranger who's a listener, and they'll reach out, they'll email you, or they might comment or DM you and say, hey, I just wanted to let you know I love the podcast. Thank you so much for making it, right? This happens if you're doing a good job. And so what most of us do is we just say, oh, thanks, and then move on. But that is the opportunity to get a rating and a review. And so here's how you do that. When you inevitably hear from those fans, those listeners who like your show so much that they went out of their way to find your contact information and write to you, when they do that, respond by thanking them for the kind words and then asking them what app they use to listen. They're going to be so happy that you're engaging in a conversation with them. And so you ask them what app they use to listen. And if they say Apple or Spotify, then you respond to them and say, wonderful. Have you rated and reviewed the show? A lot of times they'll be like, no, I didn't even think of that. And you say, awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for the kind words. You've already made my day. But I'd be really grateful if you could share what you just shared with me in a review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify and rate the show 5 stars. Would you be willing to do that? They'll always say yes. And then you just thank them profusely. Pat Flynn, even at his current audience size, will even send a video message personally to this person asking them to rate and review. It's totally worth it. If you do it this way, in a personal way, at the moment that your listeners reach out and express gratitude for you, rather than asking at the end of every episode in a canned, boring, pre-recorded outro, you're going to get way more ratings and way more reviews. Now, the only thing I'll add to this is that you can still ask for ratings and reviews in mass, right, on your podcast or even on your email list, but I would recommend doing it like a couple times times per year. Kind of like how NPR only asks for money once a year, right? Every December, they do a big drive for you to donate to your favorite shows. If you pick one time or maybe twice a year to ask everybody, hey, this week I'm asking everyone to rate and review the show if you enjoyed it, you're going to get more of an uptake than if you just kind of asked every single episode and people, kind of tuned it out. Because what happens is if you wait until like 6 months in and make a really big ask for everyone to rate and review, then everybody who hears that is going to be like, oh yeah, I love this show. I'm totally going to do that, because it's a different ask that you're making for them. So I'm actually going to employ this strategy in a couple weeks in the Grow the Show podcast. I haven't done this yet myself, to make a big ask for a rating and review. And so I'm going to do that, and I'll report back in the Grow the Show Facebook group what the results were that we saw. But I do know for a fact that Pat Flynn's strategy works as well. So with those two strategies, you'll be able to get more ratings, get more reviews for your podcast, without having to just ask on every single episode. So that's it for this one. Hopefully super quick and punchy and valuable. I do invite you to join us in the free Grow the Show Facebook group for more information and to get updated on how this went for me. And of course, if you want to learn my 4 steps for growing a thriving podcast business, taking it past 6 figures, the link to my free masterclass is below as well. And of course, like and subscribe if you want more podcast growth strategies like this one. I'll see you in the next video.